I just love that you gave yourself full permission to completely fall apart and move through all the emotions that you were carrying. When you release your body, it like gives your body permission to fully lean into labor even more because you're no longer fighting it.
Like pains me whenever I see women with epidurals. I can't imagine stifling that part of my birth experience. You're missing out on such a beautiful opportunity because it is spiritual and it's emotional and it's physiological. And there's so many of these big aspects that just get completely missed whenever we have a woman who's just anesthetized.
You're not just numbing the pain, you're numbing the feeling. What you're describing, the holistic, deeply spiritual nature of childbirth. We try to hold it all together when what our body truly needs, our spirit truly needs, is to actually become a mess, to let it all go. Hello and welcome to the Pain-Free Birth podcast. Today I am interviewing Laurynn Howard, who is a mama of two, a doula, and studying as a midwife. And so she is sharing with us today her mostly pain-free home birth story with her second baby. And I am so excited for this because she has some beautiful gems in this story that I know are going to encourage you. So welcome to the podcast, Laurynn.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Me too. How did you said you delivered your first birth in a birth center, your daughter. How did that light a fire in you for birth work?
So, growing up, I was always told and shown that birth is just this crazy, terrible, painful event that just happens to you, and it's just the price that you pay for having kids. And so going into birth, obviously that was a big fear in my mind as a woman, just like all the things I had been told about birth growing up. And whenever I was told by a good friend about the option of the birth center, because that's where I gave birth to my daughter, was in a birth center. That's whenever I started viewing birth kind of alternatively, and I ended up hiring a doula. She really encouraged me and showed me some different pain relief techniques. I took your pain-free birth course, and I ended up having an unmedicated birth at the birth center, no complications except for a really long labor, but it's my first baby, so that can happen. And just going through the process unmedicated and seeing that it was absolutely nothing like what anybody told me it was going to be like. For myself, experiencing just the spiritual transformation that came with it, the total surrender I had to have to the process, and just the beauty of everything and the way my body worked, the way my baby worked with my body, just really shed a whole new light on birth for me. And I just left that experience being like, I think every woman should know that birth is amazing, actually. And I want them all to know that. So
I couldn't agree more. You got the birth bug.
Yeah.
Like so many of our students do. It's just awesome when you experience the high and how empowering it is. It's like you can't help but share with the world. Like, you have to know this, and not everyone is ready for that knowledge. Not everyone wants to know that. So you have to, then you kind of go through this journey of like, okay, let me just use more wisdom with who I share and read the room. But I totally get that feeling of like, every woman needs to know that this is true and this is possible.
Exactly.
Tell us, how did your second birth differ from which was a home birth? How did that differ from your birth center experience?
Gosh, honestly, the only similarity between the two was that they were both unmedicated and uncomplicated births. But the fact that I was at home changed everything for me. And it helped so much with the coping aspect of birth. Just coping with the waves as they came was so much easier whenever I was in my own space, not having to calculate what time I was going to be leaving to make it to the birth center in time, and how dilated was I going to be able to be admitted, was I far enough along for XYZ? I didn't have any of those concerns going into it this time. I just knew that I was going to be at home at the beginning of this process and at the end of it. So, I just made myself cozy and pretty much was just along for the ride in that way. I will also say
It's a
too that
great feeling to
yes,
just like pick up
definitely.
your feet, be like, hey, everyone's coming to me now.
Exactly, exactly. Like, okay, I don't have to go anywhere.
Yeah. Why do you think your second birth, you said it was mostly pain-free. Tell us about that.
So really, it started with prodromal labor, which whenever I tell you the story, I can get into a little bit more. But I did have prodromal labor for about a week leading into it this time. And again, I think whenever people hear prodromal labor, they think, oh, that's terrible. Like I would never want to go through that. But I actually think the prodromal labor had such a purpose in this birth story because by the
Mhm.
time active labor began, I was so happy that I was in labor and I was so welcoming. I was like ready to be done with all the irregular contractions. I just wanted to know when I was going to meet my baby. So by the time things picked up, I was so excited. And I really think having that positive outlook and being excited about the strength of my waves, I think really did help with the process too. And helped it be more pain free. I remember taking your course with my first, and obviously with your first baby, there's a lot of anxiety and there's a lot of unknown. And so I would remember bits and pieces of it during my labor with her. But with this second one, I really remembered certain things you talked about in your course, like about, um, you know, just like when to breathe, and you talk about whenever the wave's starting and there's like a certain level, where you want to start your breaths. And I remembered thinking about that vividly, the way you described transition. One thing particularly was whenever you described the fundus at the top of the uterus and the baby kicking off of it, I remember I was actively searching for that feeling like, with my second whereas with my first I was just in the heat of transition. With my second I was in transition, just okay, when is he going to kick my fundus? Like I was waiting for that. And so definitely the course really helped a lot with my second. It helped with the first two in many ways, but as far as the pain-free stuff, I do think I applied a lot more with my second. And yeah.
Did you feel the baby kicking your fundus?
Yes, I did. I did whenever he started descending, and it was crazy. And I
Really?
was, yes, and during the waves, I was very focused on getting him out of me. But, in between, I was still having a good time, even during transition. It was crazy, and I never expected it to be that way. It's kind of like you say, you pray for a pain-free birth, and you pray for, to get through it and just, for it to be a positive experience, but for it to actually happen is so different. And so, you
Yeah.
know, whenever it was actually happening, I just couldn't even believe it. I was just so thankful.
Well, tell us about that birth. What was your mood like? Was there like a point in time that you realized like, oh, this is what I prayed for. This is not painful, or like what was your head like, your mindset like in those moments?
Yes. So starting out, it was prodromal labor for about a week, and then things picked up very slowly. I had bloody show on a Thursday. I told my mom she needed to fly here because my daughter, I went to 42 weeks with her. My son came at 39 and 6. So I had bloody show 39 weeks and 4 days. And I called my mom. She had her flight booked for 31 weeks or 41 weeks because we were convinced that I was going over again. I was not, I was going to go to 42 again. That was just the mentality I was in. So whenever I was 39 weeks having bloody show, I was calling my mom like, you need to get here. This is going to happen sooner than we thought. I was so excited whenever the contractions started and got more intense and got regular. I remember texting my doula and saying, I'm going to get in the shower. Things are kind of just, they're chill right now, but I'm going to get in the shower. And she knew that was her cue to come over because with my first getting in the shower, I needed that shower whenever things were really picking up. So she's like, I
Yeah.
think things are picking up more than you think they are. And she headed over whenever I told her I was getting in the shower. I There was a whole range of emotion. I had actually a really, really big emotional release during this labor. It was
Yeah.
crazy. It was intense. And then after that is really whenever things really picked up. And I got in the
Tell us
birth tech.
about the emotional release, because I talk about that a lot, but I would love to hear that story if you're open to sharing it.
Yeah, so again, it's one of those things I'd heard about happening. I knew it was a thing. Never happened to me with my first, didn't see it on the radar. But throughout the morning as I was laboring, I just kept getting weepy and
Mm.
I would cry a little bit and then I'd be like, okay, I need to chill. My photographer's here, my doula's here, you know. Um,
I gotta get
so
it together.
exactly. And I was missing my toddler so much. She was with my in-laws. I was missing her so much, and I FaceTimed her and everything, and I was just weepy. I was crying. I was like, I miss her. And but I felt all this emotion bubbling up inside of me, and I just kept pushing it down. Like, it's fine. We're just gonna keep going. You know, this is nothing. I'm just missing Olive. And eventually, I just knew I needed a good cry. And I actually
Yeah.
asked my doula and photographer to leave. I was like, I just want some time alone with my husband right now. I was in the
Yeah.
shower, and as soon as they left the room, I just broke down. I mean, I was sobbing uncontrollably. And the past, year and a half with my toddler had just been so hard. My marriage, we have faced so many complications or challenges, I'd say. My marriage, we faced a lot of hardships the past year and a half. And moving to North Carolina a couple years back, I moved kind of on a whim. I knew I was going to marry this guy, and so I moved here to be with him. And it kind of came at the expense of my relationship with some of my family members at the time. And so just a lot of stuff I hadn't really processed, allowed myself to process. And I remember
Yeah.
crying, and at one point I was crying over my family members. At one point I was crying over my sister. My older sister passed away in 2018.
Wow, I'm so
Something that,
sorry.
thank you. I appreciate it. It's something I hadn't cried about in a long time. And my husband's just like, are you like, what's going on? Talk to me. He's holding me and swaying with me, and I'm just crying on him. And first it's my sister, and then it's my other family members, and then it's our marriage, and then it's I miss my toddler again, and then it's back to the start, and it's my sister again. And just it was everything. And I cried probably for about an hour, and my doula actually asked, she was like, are you okay? And I said, I'm great. This is much needed. And she said, okay, because I
Mm.
know emotions can be good or they can be bad, so I just want to make sure. And then she respectfully walked away again. And I just remember each thing that I processed came with a huge, strong wave immediately after. And it was this crazy,
Yeah. Wow.
cathartic, like I would cry and cry, and then I would have this huge wave, and it's like that the whatever thing I was crying about got washed away with it. And then I would cry about something else.
Wow.
And then I would have another wave, and that thing would just get washed away with that one. And I felt that way, up until I was done crying, really. And I totally turned a corner in the shower. I think that's whenever things really, really picked up. So
How did you know when you were done?
I just I felt light. I felt lighter. I felt just, that feeling you have after you have a really good cry and you feel kind of tired, but you just know that the weight of the world's been lifted off your shoulders and you can just take a breath. That's how I felt.
Yeah, that is so beautiful. I am obsessed with this story because, like, birth is so spiritual. And when we deduce it to something just physical, like, oh, your body just has to open and you grow, you open to 10 centimeters and then you push out this 8-pound baby, and it's so mechanical. And it just does such a disservice to women and truly representing the holistic, deeply spiritual nature of childbirth, which is what you're describing, and the way that our heart and our emotions and our spirit carry emotions that show up physically in our body, and that you are carrying this grief. That's what I'm hearing, is like this pain, this grief. You had to allow yourself to grieve, and thankfully you knew enough, you were wise enough to actually ask for that space. How many women just shove it down and think they have to hold it all together for the midwife, the doula, the photographer, the woman in the room next door in their hospital? They don't want to scare anybody or be too loud or be too emotional. And we do this, like, we try to hold it all together when what our body truly needs, our spirit truly needs, is to actually become a mess, to let it all go, to fall apart instead of trying to hold it together. Like we have to
Yes.
fall apart. And I just love that you gave yourself full permission to completely fall apart and move through all the emotions that you were carrying. And not just like one, person grieving over the loss of relationships, but it was like wave after wave after wave. And then the contractions that coming and washing that away. It's like when you release your body, it like gives your body permission to fully lean into labor even more because you're no longer fighting it. You're not resisting. Like when we're carrying that emotional baggage and that weight of grief or pain or loss or heartache, I feel like our body has to work double time because it's not only trying to open and release and contract, but it's also carrying this emotional weight and it's substance. It's like energetic substance in our bodies. And so many labors I've seen have like a 180-degree turn when the woman did exactly what you did and had an emotional release and let go of whatever was troubling her heart. And I just am in awe of this, that you took an entire hour or so to just cry. Like, that's the bravest thing you could do. And we think, "Oh, I don't wanna be weak. I don't wanna be, to be so vulnerable." And yet birth calls us to those depths of vulnerability and weakness and neediness to the point where we can't hold on to it anymore, and we have to let go. So I just, like, I just congratulate you. Like I am in awe of that story, and it's such a beautiful picture of what happens in birth that is so normal and so physiological and so needed for so many women.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I could not agree more with everything you just said. And to the tune of what you were saying too about, women wanting to hold everything in and, just push it all aside. That's one thing that really like pains me whenever I see women with epidurals and they're posting these videos and they're like pushing their baby out and they're just like joking about what they're going to have for dinner. And, that's great. If that's what you want, truly, like more power to you. That's your decision. But for me, I can't imagine stifling that part of my birth experience,
Yeah.
because by having that complete numbness where you can't feel anything that's going on and you're just, joking around about video games and stuff or whatever it is, you're really just, you're missing out on such a beautiful opportunity because it is spiritual and it's emotional and it's physiological. And there's so many of these big aspects that just get completely missed whenever we have a woman who's just anesthetized, I mean,
Yeah.
and so really it
It's
made me
so true,
thankful.
and yes, and it's like you're not just numbing the pain, you're numbing the feeling. You're numbing the
Yes.
emotion. And
Hmm.
I feel like it's often to avoid feeling, to avoid
Yes.
that exact release that you're talking about because it does get so intense. We're confronted with this wall, and it's not just a physical pain, it is an emotional like confrontation of like, in order to move on to this next phase of labor, I have to dump all this. Like I have to have an emotional release. And
Yeah.
some of us hold on so tight to control that getting the epidural is almost, it's like in order to avoid really feeling, not just the
Hmm.
pain, the sensation, the uncomfortable physical feeling, but the emotional pain as well. And so not that there's anything wrong with getting the pain medicine, and there's women that have where it becomes really useful. I've seen births where it's
Yeah.
like really needed for mom. She needs a break, her body needs a break, she needs a rest, but make it an intentional thing, an empowered thing. And I would just encourage the women who, don't no need to feel guilty over it, but don't do it to avoid feeling what you need to feel in labor.
Yes. Yes. In midwifery school right now, in this textbook I'm reading by Anne Fry, she says in our Western society, people treat pain like it's death, and really
Yeah.
they want to bypass all the parts of labor that God intentionally designed. Like, we're impatient, but God designed labor to be a process where we don't know when things are going to happen and we can't put it on our schedule. And so our impatience is supersede and our, want for an elective induction because we are just so impatient, that's superseding God's, the way he designed birth to be spontaneous and in
Yeah.
his own timing, and our want for, for everything to be completely without like to not work hard for it. You know what I mean? We want to just be able to just let it happen and
Yeah.
just chill the whole time. It's not made to be a process like that. God designed it to be a process that is completely transforming if you let
Yeah.
it be, so.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. It's meant to be a rite of passage. It's meant to be
Yes.
transformational. It's not, he never promised it to be easy and convenient and on our schedules.
Hmm.
And I think so many times we are confronted with our need to be in control, to be on our schedule, to have our expectations met. And yet motherhood is none of those things.
Hmm.
like like if
Yeah.
you're going to through this transition from maiden to mother, there is a letting go, there is a death, there is a surrender, and that is beautifully represented in the birth process. There is a death
Yes.
to self and a rebirth. So, and what a beautiful way that we can do that. When we embrace that, we can do that with joy. We can even
Mm.
do it without pain for the most part.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean it's not hard. It doesn't mean it doesn't require so much from us, that it
Yes.
really requires our all. It requires our full and complete surrender. And people sometimes hear pain-free birth and they go, well, that's just crazy. But it's actually one of the most intense spiritual, physical, emotional things you'll do, when you allow yourself to fully feel everything, but you don't have to fight it and resist it. How did God work in your labor and delivery?
So actually, this flows perfectly from what we were just talking about because where we left off, I was in the shower, kind of having that emotional release. And while I was in the shower, my doula was calling my midwife. I'm so glad she did in hindsight, because I got out of the shower and she said, all right, the midwife's on her way. And I'm sitting there like, that's not time yet. It's not time. I was in no pain. I was having a great time still listening to my playlist, which, by the way, that's a whole other thing. I made a great playlist this time. That really helped too. But,
Oh, nice. You'll have to send us the link. I'll put it in the show notes for the ladies.
okay. It's so funny because there's all kinds of stuff. There's like Tenacious D on there. And I'll tell you, the first time I tried the whole worship slow, and there's definitely a time for that. But this time I just put stuff that made me want to dance and sing, and it was a much better time. So
I love that. I just did a podcast with a woman who said the opposite. She was like, "This birth, it was
really,
all worship. I knew I could only do worship." And then you're saying the opposite. And I just love how it's like each birth is its own vibe. Like each birth
yes.
is a different energy.
Oh my gosh, I just told my husband, I feel like each birth taught me something totally different, and I'm sure the next one will
Yes.
teach me another different lesson, because the first one was all about patience and this one was all about surrender. 100%.
Wow. 100% agree.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so it's just, it really is different vibes for different births, which is so crazy to think about. But
So how
yeah,
did you
so
surrender in this birth?
yeah, so my midwife, so she gets here and I am telling her, my doula called you too early, I think, because I'm pretty sure I'm only like 4 centimeters. I can't remember if I said that out loud. I don't know. I was lost in labor land at this point. But in my head, I was definitely only 3 or 4 centimeters. There's no way I was, it was time for her to be there. And she said, well, do you want me to check you? If you want me to, I can. I was like, yeah, please, because I don't want you to be here if I'm super early in my labor. And she checked me and she said, no, we're going to blow the birth pool up. Like, the head is right there, Laurynn, and I was like, oh my gosh, okay. So I was shocked,
Wow. Were you fully dilated? Did she say?
She said I was 8 and 100% effaced, and that his head was like right there. So,
And
he's
you were
fully
even in
engaged.
pain? You thought you were still
No,
in early labor?
literally. I mean, I was looking back, it's easy to see that I was in active labor in the shower, but I totally thought I was in early labor still. I was
Wow.
not. Yeah, it was crazy. And
Because that's
so,
like right around transition is 8
uh-huh.
centimeters, like the most
Yeah.
intense part. You're like
Yeah.
ready to send your midwife away. Like, no, it's not even real labor yet.
I know. It's crazy. And so she said, we're going to blow up the pool. And I started just sobbing again. So much crying this birth. But this time it was tears of happiness. I was so excited. And that was the moment earlier you asked, did you have a moment where you said, oh, I've been wanting this pain-free birth. And that was the moment where I realized, oh my gosh, I'm doing it. Like I'm
Yeah.
having I'm
It's
having a
working.
thing. Yes, it's
Working.
working. Yes, that is
Yeah.
exactly. And I was so happy. So, I got into the tub and there was worship songs mixed in on the playlist. Okay. And there was a song called Peace Be Still, it's the birth song, Peace Be Still. I don't know if you've
Yeah.
heard it, but it's so
Yeah.
good.
It's
It
like, yeah.
came on. Yeah, and I just immediately had a whole moment of worship, and it was so tangible. I mean, I was crying, my husband was crying, my mom was crying. Again, more
Wow.
tears, but everybody was crying. I felt my sister, the one who passed away, I felt her presence there with us, and I felt just God's presence. I felt him laying his hands over me, telling me, your baby's going to be here soon. My contractions slowed down in the water. They did that way with my first two, and I shortly realized that I wasn't going to be giving birth in the water, but it was a really nice break and a really nice, just deep breath, like intense worship moment. And throughout the whole song, I was just, oh, like the words were just everything to me, and just thanking God for everything he'd done for me, for the labor being as beautiful as it had been so far, everything. And
Mm. I'm
eventually,
noticing this like theme of gratitude in so many
yeah.
of these pain-free birth stories of women I'm interviewing.
Mm,
And it's just like this overwhelming gratitude in the moment for what God is doing, for how your body is made, for like everything that brought you to where you are. And I just think that that is such a key here to really experiencing the fullness of what God has for us. So
yeah.
continue. It's so
You
beautiful.
know, it does. It's true. And one of my favorite things with my clients who are believers, my doula clients who are believers. So one of my favorite affirmations for my clients who are believers actually is thank you, God, for these contractions. And
Yeah.
I've noticed that the mood shifts whenever I can get them saying that out loud. Whenever they're in a moment where they are thinking, I cannot do this, or they're telling me I can't do this. And, I tell them just thank God for the contractions, thank him. And
Yeah.
it always shifts the mood
Yeah.
every single time. And they immediately go from I can't do this to I'm doing this and thank you, God, for this.
Yeah.
Gratitude 100%, I think is such a strong emotion, that can counteract the fear
Yeah.
and the tension.
Absolutely.
But
So you had him, or you were in the tub, but you realized
yes.
I shouldn't have him in the tub. What happened next?
Yeah, things had slowed down and I knew I needed gravity. The whole time I had been kind of standing, swaying, having one leg up. So I thought I needed to get back in that position. So I got out of the tub and I mean, maybe 10 minutes later, my water broke and I was heavy in transition at that point. I felt him descending. That part was not pain free. That's the one part of the birth that I would say is not pain free.
It's
Um,
intense.
it was, and I remember just there were curse words flying and there were, but I will
This is
say that,
real life, girls.
yes, it was getting real. And I just remember saying, the baby is coming, the baby is coming, and, but I will say during the contractions, during transition, I was like still singing my songs and having a good time. It was just a lot more intense of a time. And then whenever
Yeah.
the contractions would come, I wanted everybody quiet and, because
Yeah.
the contractions were
It
definitely
takes a
painful at
lot
that
of
point.
concentration. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it took all my concentration. He was descending and I went instinctually to the side of my bed. They say that you find like the safest place to give birth. I went to my side of the bed. It's the tiniest corner in the entire room and everybody's trying to, my photographer's like on the bed trying to get photos and my midwife's, trying to catch the baby and my husband's trying to catch the baby and my mom is literally stuck in the complete corner of the room, like just stuck there because she can't move. There's no room. And that's where I gave birth. I gave birth kneeling and my husband
Wow.
tried to catch my baby, but actually I didn't make a noise while I was pushing him out. And so he didn't know that he was coming out. And so he fell right through his hands. But so that part was
Like you
fun.
had one job. Just kidding.
I know. It's so funny too, because in the moment he was saying things like, oh, I see his head's out. And in my head, I could have sworn to you that I said out loud, I know, I feel it. But then looking back at the video, I was dead silent. So
Wow.
yeah, it's crazy. I was
Wow.
talking to myself in my
How
head,
long were
but
you pushing for?
oh my gosh, maybe 5 minutes. I
Wow.
mean, maybe maybe a little bit more. I couldn't even tell you though, because I wasn't intentionally pushing until his head was coming out. And then I just wanted him out at that point.
Yep.
But before that, I was
So
just
your
bearing down
body
with my
labored him
contractions.
down. Yeah,
100%,
all the
100%. And I
way.
felt that feeling of the fundus, and I knew like he was coming down on his own. And so I really just used gravity. I was in a kneeling position, and I would kind of just bear down a little bit
Hmm.
with the contraction. And then, yeah, I didn't push until he was crowning. I pushed to get the rest of his head out. And then once I felt his shoulders coming out, I gave a tiny push to get the rest of his body out. And those were the only two times I actively pushed.
So like two pushes in this whole
Hmm.
birth.
Yeah.
Isn't it amazing how the body like does the hard work for us?
Yes, yes. And that part was so redemptive too, because my daughter, I was exhausted after a 36-hour labor. I was on my back
Wow.
pushing, just falling asleep between contractions, pushing as hard as I could, purple pushing really by the end of it, because I was so
Mm,
tired. I had to get her out. And, um, it was that was the one thing I told my doula. I really want a redemptive pushing phase. I do not
yeah.
want to push like that again. And
You got it, girl. What, as a birth professional, how do you carry these themes, these truths, and your experience into the work that you do with women?
yeah, so I think before I was very much passive about, you know, informing women about how I believe birth should be, and, the purpose of unmedicated birth and the ways they can cope. I was very much in the camp of whatever makes you feel good, like, let's do it. And now, after having this birth experience, I really feel convicted to be honest with my clients, very raw and honest. And I feel that God has given me the clients who he knows will take my advice and my opinions like seriously, and also people who won't be upset whenever I tell them you're better than this intervention. Like, it doesn't have to be this way. Your doctor is not giving you informed consent in this situation. Um, you aren't trusting the process. You need to log off Instagram, like just different things that I've really felt just, after this birth again, the power of it, seeing how it could be, I really have felt convicted to help my clients have those experiences. And a big part of that is being honest with them and not
Yeah.
just, saying, oh, okay, well, I guess if you're tempted to do the induction, let's do it.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
like I
telling them
want
the
to remind,
truth.
exactly, telling them the truth about it, reminding them their reasons why. Um, and again, just being upfront with them, about different things that they bring to me. And I
Yeah.
feel like my clients have really appreciated that too.
How do you feel like attending births in a hospital? If you have done that, how do you navigate that? Knowing what you know about what's possible with home birth, pain-free birth, ecstatic birth, all the things. How do you navigate hospital birth where there's such a dramatic difference in environment and how women are supported? How do you support clients in that environment and help them have an empowered birth?
So actually, I do have hospital clients, but I have quit taking them on. So I'm kind of finishing out the remainder of them right now. Um, I have quit taking them because I found that it is really, really hard to have a physiologic birth in an environment that is not conducive to that. The hospital rooms are made for intervention. The monitor is in the center of the room. It's the center of care is intervention and management of the labor process. And so I have found that I've had clients who are able to have good hospital births, but it's so much of it is the providers they choose. I'm always so encouraging, choose a midwife. If you are a low risk pregnancy with no complications, there's no reason why you shouldn't be in midwifery care.
Yep.
CNMs tend to be a lot more hands off, a lot less intervention. Some of them can be, but also ask your provider questions whenever you're meeting with them for the first time. Remember that you're not confined to whatever provider's closest to your house. You have options and you're hiring them. So I always tell them, ask them, what is your C-section rate? What is your episiotomy rate? Do you have experience with clients who go unmedicated? Are you supportive of unmedicated births? Are you going to try and induce me if I go past my due date? Asking those really important questions right off the bat with a provider is going to give you a very clear idea of who they are. Asking them how they feel about you having a doula, because some providers are truly hostile with doulas,
Yeah.
and it can be really uncomfortable. And it's uncomfortable for the mom in that situation to have this person she really cares about and wants at her birth, and her provider is clearly being weird about it,
Yeah.
So definitely the provider they choose, the environment. So only have people in the room with you who you feel completely safe with, aside from obviously your doctor and your nurses. You can't necessarily control who's going to be on call. You can fire your nurse and ask for a different nurse. So that's something I tell people sometimes if they need to.
Hmm.
But just being protective over your space, and then also having somebody, if you aren't going to have a doula, I heavily recommend your partner doing the work, becoming educated on what you want, why you want it, and being as adamant about it as you are.
Yeah.
So, because whenever you're in that position, you are in labor land and they're offering things, you need to have somebody, who can say, oh, that's not what she wants. Let's not even talk about the epidural right now. She hasn't asked for it. She said she would ask whenever she wants it. Just things of that nature. Having a team who's very supportive of your wishes. Um,
Yep.
and
I
then
totally
also,
agree. Yeah.
yeah. And then I
Okay.
also recommend birth centers. If it's a possibility, go with a birth center. It's a great middle ground option.
Yes, yes. And I totally agree in that having a provider, if you are birthing in a hospital, having a midwife that is there to care for you, and one that practices with the midwifery model of care, because like you said, not all
Mhm.
of them do, but a really good provider. And there's OBs that are really amazing too. But a good provider is really going to shield you from a lot of that chaos and stress and the protocols of the hospital if they really trust physiological birth. And that's rare to find in a hospital setting, but they do exist. And I've had
Yeah.
clients have beautiful pain-free physiological births in hospitals, and they had providers typically that were very supportive of them. So I think you're
Yeah.
absolutely right that that's such a key there. Um, what other suggestions do you have for mothers to uh, prepare or enhance their birth experience?
So I think the biggest thing that I learned this previous time is really just surrendering to the process. Um, I know it's not always possible to not have fear going into a situation. You can't necessarily control how your body is going to react whenever the time comes, but doing as much work beforehand as you can to be comfortable with the contractions and to be comfortable with the work your body is going to be doing, to again surround yourself with the right people and the right environment to where you feel able to relax and feel happy. Think about things that make you happy, whether that be a bath, specific music, like a playlist, lights, birth affirmations, whatever that looks like. Those things truly help. Having a doula is so important. In my experience, I don't like both times my doula played such a crucial role. And even though she was more hands off the second time, I still needed her there so much spiritually, like, just because she's my doula. She's, going to be there for all my babies. And so, having somebody that you love and that you trust who is able to have that outside perspective, I think, is the importance of a doula too. Just to see, she's not as emotionally tangled as my husband would be. He's very much with me and for me, but she has that outside perspective.
Yeah. Is there anything you would recommend or that happened after baby was born that really just made this a special experience?
Yeah. So, the first thing was definitely having a surprise gender. We didn't know the gender the whole time. This time I went into pregnancy with the mentality that God created the womb without a window. And so that was for a reason. So I'm thinking, okay, maybe we should just go and not find out the gender. I think that's how it was maybe designed to be. And it was so ecstatic finding out that we had our first boy. Just a moment I will never forget. We were in shock because we both thought it was a girl. So that was really fun. And then the other thing is just the midwifery model of care in the home birth setting was incredible. I mean, the care, they fed me, they cleaned every single drop of anything off of my carpet. It was all clean. You would have never known I gave birth. They sat with me for hours and just talked and made sure I was good, that baby was good. The newborn exam was done in my own bed, and my toddler was sitting next to me, just watching
Mm,
it. And
yeah,
I
you can't have that
love
in
that.
hospital.
Yeah, yeah. It was such an amazing experience. And then my midwife came to my home for all of our visits postpartum. She did 24-hour, 72-hour, 1 week, 2 week, and 6 week. So,
Wow.
not having to leave my house was such a big blessing too.
Game
And
changer.
it is a game changer. So I did feel like the focus was a lot more on my recovery and, baby's initial weeks of life were a lot more respected and honored in that way. So
Yeah. And what was postpartum like after having such a beautiful, physiological birth?
it's so crazy. This sounds insane. I was done bleeding by the fifth day. I was literally, it's so funny. My midwife came to the 48-hour checkup and I opened the front door and she said, "Why are you up and opening the door for me?" And I was like, "Well, I just feel great. Like, I feel like I didn't even give birth." I mean, my perineum
Yes.
wasn't even that sore. I mean, maybe for 24 hours. It was the craziest.
Yes.
My husband was like, "Are you seriously done bleeding? There's no way." And I was like, "Yeah, I mean,
Yep.
I am."
Yep.
The recovery was so much better than the first time.
That same thing happened to me, and it sounds
Uh-huh.
insane because it's so radically different than
Yeah.
most women's postpartum experience. And I am convinced it is because of how you pushed. And the
Yeah.
final moments of how you manage the pushing stage can contribute to so much swelling and so much damage in your perineum and your pelvic floor, or it can set you up for like the easiest postpartum experience ever. Like I was up the next day walking around. I'm like, I don't feel like I just gave birth. And that was the
Yes.
one where I learned how to push physiologically. Night and day difference. Whereas my first, I was like recovering for weeks and weeks. And I was like, when is this this cut going to heal? I was in pain. I was sitting on the
Mm.
donut.
Yeah.
Like hearing your pushing phase and your postpartum completely makes sense to me. And that I believe that's how it's designed to be, but we
Yes.
so intervene and disrupt the pushing process, especially at the very end, and it contributes to so much pain and an unnecessary recovery for moms.
Mhm. Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, I started back with CrossFit at 6 weeks postpartum. Obviously, I do modifications and stuff, and I really am listening to my body, but I was able to jump right back into working out, to walking, all these things that I loved doing before. I was able to jump back into pretty quickly, and I had little to no pelvic floor damage, core separation, anything like that. And I absolutely agree with you. I think the pushing phase had so much to do with that.
Yep. And it's like when you respect and honor the physiological process and what your body knows how to do, and you just get out of the way, honestly. Like if
Yeah.
we just learned how to get out of the way, and I have a whole module in my course about how to push physiologically because it is so counterculture. It is so opposite of what most 90% of doctors and midwives will even do. Like most, even many home birth
Hmm.
midwives will still coach you in pushing. But if we could just stop messing up the natural process and trust our bodies. This is my soapbox, you guys. Oh man,
Yes.
I'm restraining myself from going into a whole tangent here, but
No,
I
I
just
agree. It's so true. And I see videos of people with epidurals and they're purple pushing, and all I can think is that perineum is gonna hurt so
oh, it
bad. Like
hurts
I
it
can't, like,
yeah. Totally. It's like
I
this is
feel
so
so bad.
unnecessary. You're gonna feel this
Yes.
so much in the postpartum. And when you
Yes.
let your
Yes.
body just release and like you said, you push twice with the head and then the shoulders. That's all
Mhm.
you need to do, ladies. If you're pushing before you can feel the head, you're pushing way too early and you're probably pushing way too hard. I'm guessing your postpartum with your first was not this easy if you were pushing for as long
No,
as you were. Like
not
the
at all. Yeah.
recovery time, I mean, that for that reason alone, it's like learn how to physiologically push because the difference it makes is night and day. And I love hearing it. I love hearing the stories because it just reaffirms like the body knows how to give birth and it has been
Yeah.
doing it for thousands of years. And if we just trusted the process, in most cases, it works out beautifully.
Yeah, yeah. And with my first two and my second both, I didn't tear. She called it a skid mark, but she said it wasn't
Yep.
really even a tear. And so it wasn't even tearing. I didn't tear with my first. I didn't tear with my second. So it wasn't even that. It was 100% the pushing phase, how you said,
Yeah.
just,
Well,
yeah,
it's amazing. We need more midwives, more doulas, more providers who understand this. So
yeah.
it makes me happy. It makes my heart happy to hear. Um, Thank you for sharing your experience. Is there any last words that you want to give to mothers preparing for a physiological birth, a home birth? Maybe they're going unmedicated for the first time. Like any words of advice you would share?
Yeah. Trust your body, trust the way that it was designed. It was designed by an intelligent almighty creator, and he knew exactly what he was doing whenever he designed your body and your baby. And you guys are going to work together to make this a great experience. And if you can just stay connected to your body, to your baby, and to God during the process, you're going to have a great time and you're going to get this done and you're going to feel so good whenever you're done with it.
Amen. I love it. You're like the pep talk doula. Like I can hear you
Thank you.
in labor, like coaching your clients. Like, girl, we're gonna get this done, and you're gonna
Yeah,
rock this.
that is me.
That's perfect. I love it.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, Laurynn, thank you so much for sharing your story. And for anyone who wants to connect with Laurynn on Instagram, you can follow her at Fruit of Her Womb and See to follow along with her journey becoming a midwife and sharing this truth with the world. We'll put that in the show notes as well. And thank you so much. And we'll see you on the next episode.